Good afternoon and welcome to the third and final installment of our three-part series in Advancing the Independent Living Movement, Out the Disability Community Vote. Today's topic will be Get Out the Vote, the time is now. My name is Ron Kermani. It's my pleasure to be with you today. As background, I'm a recovering newspaper reporter here in Albany, New York for the Albany Times-Union newspaper. I spent 30 years in executive public relations and advertising positions, first for the New York State Public Employees Federation, the large white-collar state workers union, then with the New York State Trial Lawyers Association as their communications director, then as executive editor for the Civil Service Employees Association, and my last stop on the train was with the governor's office as the senior vice president of communications for the New York State Higher Education Services Corporation. But beyond all that, I really appreciate what everybody's talking about today because I was an election inspector in Albany County for many, many years. So that's my background. Let's talk about what we're doing today on this webinar. The statewide Systems Advocacy Network was created to support the independent living movement in the development of local partnerships and coalitions to engage in community education about issues affecting people with disabilities. The overall goal is to increase knowledge and visibility about the individual and societal importance of independent living, resulting in positive change in communities throughout New York State. SSAN workshops over the last 7 years have trained on community engagement strategies, models for effective community outreach and education, principles for holding and participating in community-based meetings, dealing with opposition, and one of my favorite topics, engaging the press. Those workshops have also included developing a timely Save Medicaid campaign, how to maintain the personal commitment to advocacy in the face of opposition, and issue fatigue and campaigns for social change. This year's SSAN workshop takes community outreach and education back to where all grassroots advocacy must go to make real change, and that's the ballot box. The local, federal, and state elections looming large, it is up to the disability community to let candidates know the power of the community's vote and to elect politicians with inclusive civil and human rights agendas. Now, just a few housekeeping tips before we get started. Closed captions are available for this webinar. You will see a notification in the controls at the top of your screen. Select closed caption. Now, after selecting closed caption, you will see the captioning at the bottom of your screen. To make adjustments in the caption size, click on the arrow next to the Stop Start Video and choose Video Settings. Click on Accessibility. Move the slider to adjust the caption size, and you may choose small, medium, or large. Now, if you have any questions during the presentation, please click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and type in your question. And I will monitor this box and relay your questions to our speaker. During the Q&A portion of each session at the end, you will all be unmuted so we can have an open discussion. Now, today we'll start our program by getting out the vote in the weeks leading up to Election Day with Andy Lee. She is Director of Voter Service for the League of Women's Voter of Albany County. Andy Lee and her colleague Lynn Nugent are members in good standing of the League of Women's Voters of Albany County. Andy is the Director of Voter Services Portfolio and manages a team of people to cover the many facets that position requires. Currently, a lot of effort is going into Get Out the Vote and learning how to reach out to communities unrepresented at the polls. Take it away, Andy and Lynn.
Hi there, thank you. Yes, I am Andy Lee, and my colleague Lynn Nugent is in the audience somewhere. So yeah, we work with the League of Women Voters. Our work with Get Out the Vote is part of the Voter Services portfolio. I don't know if everyone on today is in New York. The information that I'm going to be presenting is mostly about the Albany area and is exclusive to the state of New York, unfortunately, because voter law does change state to state. So I think if you're a resident, if you vote out of a different state, you could look up, take notes and look up what's different in, say, New Jersey or Connecticut or Massachusetts, because there may be some significant differences or some minor differences. Just a little bit of background. Normally we get out the vote starting in March for the fall elections. Our biggest efforts among young people are usually spring and fall. We canvass thousands of high school and college age kids. In working people, we set up registration events at in all kinds of places. We try to get to bus stops and barbershops. We go to the Empire State Plaza, where working people pass through every single day, thousands of people. We attend new citizen ceremonies. We do several thousand new citizens every year. We go to the 5 Alive events throughout the summer. We go to festivals and events throughout the year. For retirees, we like to attend events like active aging and bringing voter registration tables to care facilities. And we offer like short educational events, slideshows and talks and things like that. Normally we register about 7,500 people in Albany County every year. This year, of course, we were cut short after just one large and one small high school registration event, Albany High School. We got about 240 students in the early spring before COVID. And we were not able to get to any college campus visits before those shut down. So overall, our registrations are down to a real trickle, which is very disappointing. We've done a number of Zoom type events like this one in the months since Corona came calling, but we haven't been able to register very many people. So whatever anyone can do to help bolster the number of new voters, it's incredible. It's an incredible thing to be able to help with that and to improve overall voter turnout. Next slide, please. So these are the main reasons that people have stated for why they don't vote. And if anybody is interested, I did actually keep a running tally on a clipboard at different events all over Albany County for a whole year. I would also add that for anyone with disabilities, voting can be really hard. Voting locations have to be ADA, but that does not make getting there easy. And absentee ballots are not available in any large print formats. So unless someone has help, if they have a visual challenge, they're better off actually going to the poll and getting help there. So any way you look at it, it's not super easy. Many people feel disconnected from the political system. Their world may never feel like it changes, whether they vote or not. For people who drop out of school to raise kids or get jobs and work, they may not have a lot of context in terms of civics and history. Young people will feel especially disconnected from the political system because so few young people have positions of power. We've been working with prison officials to include information for former felons to register to vote at the end of their sentence or parole. Voting is actually a really good indicator that a former felon is adjusting well and are not likely to reoffend. So I thought that was really interesting. Before COVID-19, we were expecting online voter registration in New York State to be implemented. It was passed along with a slew of other voter reforms in 2019. But unfortunately, it's had to take a back seat financially and in terms of time to the large volume of absentee ballots and other upgrades that the boards of elections across the state have had to manage. So hopefully they get back to it soon. It'll make registration a lot easier and more effective. Next slide, please. Talking about voting is not the same as talking politics, and I think it's important to mention this. So the League encourages people to talk about voting to everyone. The more people you talk to, the better. What we don't encourage is partisan discussion or arguments, because it can really be off-putting to people and keep people from voting. So there are a number of groups throughout the US who are working on Get Out the Vote. Some of them are partisan, some of them are nonpartisan. If you are familiar with using web searches like Bing and Google, you can just go ahead and search it. Is vote411.org partisan? You can insert the name of any organization that you're interested in finding out more information on. Bringing nonpartisan information to the public is a critical step in getting more people to vote. If you are spreading the get out the vote message, you may have to work at remaining impartial. Focus on setting people up with a plan to get them to the poll. If people ask about your personal political affiliations or allegiances, just redirect the conversation back to the topic of getting them registered or getting them an absentee ballot or whatever it is that they need. So the League has a very strong reputation for nonpartisanship and in many instances for advocacy and impartiality in elections. And we use this reputation frequently to bring together voter education initiatives like our online sites, candidate forums, in-class education in schools, and tabling at community events. Next slide, please. So there are 3 voting options for most New Yorkers. The one that requires the most lead time is this absentee voting, and I'm going to take a minute to explain that in a second. But basically, it's a 2-step process. There's an application that can either be picked up or downloaded. Every Board of Elections will have those, and the one here in Albany is 260 South Pearl Street, where the DMV used to be located. But every Board of Elections across the state will have those available for you. They are also downloadable. You can go to your county Board of Elections and print it out. So once you have your application picked up or downloaded, you need to fill it out. You need to make sure and sign and date it. And then either mail it back to the Board of Elections or drop it off. There is no way to do this online. Like, you actually have to have that piece of paper filled out and either mail it or drop it off. The second step is that once they receive that, they will double check to make sure that you are a resident at the address that you've given them. Then your ballot comes in a big envelope. Inside, you will have the ballot and 2 additional envelopes. You fill in your ballot, check both sides, make sure you've done everything that you're offered. And then you're going to place that into what's called the inner envelope. This envelope has to be signed and dated. It'll show you where. And then you have to get your fancy gloves on, because there is a second envelope that is exactly the same size as the first envelope, and you have to put that first envelope with the ballot in it into the second envelope. And that envelope, you will go back to the Board of Elections either by drop off or by mail. If you mail it, it does require 2 stamps. So you have to make sure that you can, get it there by the deadline. So if you mail it, it has to be stamped, I believe, by November 2nd, and then it has 7 days to arrive. If you decide to just drop it off, you can drop it off anytime within the first 30 days before the election. So right around October 5th. Okay, New York also has early voting. Okay, that was also passed in that slate of voter reform in 2019. It is often underutilized, and that means it's going to be a lot less crowded. Early voting is a 9-day process starting 10 days before Election Day. And then there's 1 full day off. This year will be November 2nd, where there is no voting, no in-person voting. So early voting has far fewer locations. People generally have to travel further to cast a vote in early voting poll locations, but it should be safer with shorter lines or no lines at all. All polling locations, whether they're early or on Election Day, will have helpers on hand to assist people with disabilities. They also have the same safety protocols. And my recommendation is that you go ahead and look for your early voting location. You can do that on the Board of Elections site, is the easiest way to do it. And it will also list the times that they are open. Your third option, of course, is to go to your polling location on November 3rd. And just To remind everybody, your polling location on November 3rd is your normal polling location. Early voting locations may in fact be a totally different location. So I do recommend checking vote411.org or a similar website to ensure that you and anyone that you are helping is registered. And then the Board of Elections websites will direct all voters to their specific polling location for both early and on the 3rd. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so to get out the vote, there are some things that you should know. And to be honest, if you need to do any of these activities yourself, I suggest you do them right away. And that way you can talk to others with experience. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is have dates. If you have a list of dates available, and the easiest way to get them all together is to go on your Board of Elections website or call them and ask them, I suggest you write them down so that they're really handy. You can just grab them on your way out the door if you're going to a doctor's appointment or going for a walk. So there are some important dates, like the last date to register as a new voter, which is October 9th in 2020. The last date that you can change your address, which is October 14th. The early voting dates, which are October 24th to November 1st. And the date of the upcoming election. So those are all really important dates, and you can get those all in one, on one little piece of paper in a notebook or something for yourself. And it is really helpful to have those available when you're talking to people. It's also critical that you know where to find locations. You don't need to know where everybody's voting station is, but it's helpful to know where someone else can find that information. Where is the County Board of Elections in your area? These are just sort of basic things that if you have a sense of where people can go to find that information, you can help them do that, or you can direct them how to do that. Please make sure that you are absolutely confident in the information that you are passing on. We're living in a time of fake news and all the rest of that. So I think just make sure you've double checked all of your information. And the other piece that I would add is to be kind when you talk to people, even if they come from a place that you can't understand. People remember how they felt in their conversations with you even more than they remember the information that you're passing on. Our recommendation for where to get information are the nonpartisan sites like Vote411, turbovote.org, vote.org, and Michelle Obama's newer group, whenweallvote.org, which does state that it is nonpartisan. You can also look on the bipartisan sites like boards of elections. If someone asks you a question and you don't have an answer, you can just tell them you don't know and you'll get back to them. You could direct them where to find the information if you're confident you know where to go for them, if that's more comfortable for you instead of getting back to someone. But many people will not take that extra step. So, if you want to really encourage someone to be a voter, it may be helpful for you to walk them through those early steps. Okay, so I think the next thing I wanted to talk about was what to say to people when they tell you they don't want to register. So what do you say to someone who says that their vote doesn't matter? I tell them it does. It always matters. They may live in a state that matches their personal views or not. It doesn't mean that their voice disappears. It means that they're making a statement, right? Oh, sorry, we're still on slide number 5. Okay. Whether their vote in particular ends up deciding the entire election or not voting guarantees that their voice is not heard. So if they have a specific issue or they just generally don't want to participate, I try to use words like power and democracy and rights to remind people that they have a job to do in being a good citizen. what to say to people that tell you that they've never voted and they don't believe in government or that they're against voting. If you're interested, you can ask them why. But otherwise, I just let people know that if they're ever interested in registering or they need information, that they can seek me out. You don't try and kill yourself trying to change an entire population and make yourself crazy. So I think that knowing when to back away is okay, and having that conversation with someone about empowerment is also okay. Okay, slide number 6, please. So to help someone plan to vote, there are 3 important things that you should be careful to check with them. First is whether they're already registered. Second is ensuring they know how to get an absentee ballot and that they know, thirdly, about early voting. Almost all the online registration sites, Vote 411, Vote.org, TurboVote.org, they all contain information about polling locations. And you can also check there that people are registered if they're not sure. The only way to change information, like change of address or to change their last name if they've been married since that time, is by actually filling out either the paper registration form or the online form through the DMV right now, until we get that online voter registration organized. Okay, next slide, please. I would say do not be surprised if you meet people of any age who are not registered. Some of them may have registered decades ago, but are not registered any longer, or were registered in a different state and have moved and never re-registered. And some just may have never registered. So there are some basic requirements, right? They have to be a citizen. That is the first box on the voter registration form. Are you a citizen? And if they are not currently a citizen, do not give them a voter registration form, okay? They can get one after their citizenship is established. It's actually a felony offense to register as a voter if you are not a citizen. So don't create that problem for someone else. They have to be 18 to be able to vote, but now they can be 16 or 17 and pre-register. They cannot in New York be on parole or in jail for a felony, and they can never have been deemed incompetent by a judge. So once it's established that this person is eligible, it does help to get the registration process done together. Websites are an easy way to do it together. But if you're keen, you can go in person to your county board of elections and pick up forms. If you're targeting a particular area, like a group home, then you'll know how many forms, and that might be easier. If everyone is sheltering together already, you can sit together and fill it out. And one person is allowed to return all of the forms together in person to the Board of Elections. If you mail those in, each one needs to be individually stamped, right? Just one stamp. Until we get this online voter registration in place, people will need a DMV issued card, like a DMV license, an ID, or a permit, okay? It's all the same number. So you can use those online sites if you have that DMV issued ID, but otherwise you cannot. Okay, next slide, please. If they are a registered voter, you can ask them about their absentee ballot, about early voting and election day voting. What would work best for them? You can help them make a plan, like knowing where to find more information. You can see that on the far side of the slide there, that's an absentee ballot request form. That's the first step of the absentee ballot two-step process that I explained earlier. It does look similar to a registration form, and it does have to be filled out correctly. It's a two-page document, actually. When I print it at home, I print the second page on the back, and the second side is just instructions. You don't have to sign or fill in anything on the second page. So although absentee ballot voting is much safer for your health, there are a few risks associated with it. For example, it is a two-step process, which makes it a little more challenging. It has to be sent in significantly in advance to get your ballot in time to be counted. And if you have a group of people that you are hoping to do together, I very strongly recommend that you get going on it this week because they are going to be inundated. There are only 6 legitimate excuses, things like illness and out of the county at the time of the election. But right now, Governor Cuomo is likely to lift again that exclusion and allow anyone to utilize an absentee ballot for the November election. He has not to date signed that. The legislation was passed. My guess is that he is going to wait for it to expire and then do it as an executive order and take the credit for it. But in any event, he does support it, and I think it will pass. It will be a thing, and everybody will be able to do it that way. So you have to do the two-step process, and there's no feedback for it. And this is a problem with absentee ballots in general, as opposed to vote by mail. There's no way for a voter to know that their ballot was counted. So for example, if you send your ballot in, it is stamped by the post office, it is received in time, and somewhere along in that process, the envelope is torn, it will not be counted. There are lots of reasons why things can go wrong. So there is some risk in sending those applications in that way, or those ballots in that way. So a couple other things to keep in mind. The post office has to validate those. They have to, you can bring it in person, you can drop it off in person up to 30 days before the election. But if it goes through the mail, it has to be validated. And in the primary elections this past June, I know personally of a good number of people that either did not receive their absentee ballot in time, or never received it. Some of them never received it. And so, some of those folks are disabled and really were not able to get to the polls and lost their opportunity to vote, which you know, is a real shame. Okay, slide number 9, please. Last year, during the midterm elections, about 1/10 the number of people who voted did so by early voting. So those lower numbers mean it is much safer in terms of crowds, and these locations do have to have all of the safety protocols in place as would be found on election day. So to find your early voting locations can be a little bit of a challenge. Go to the County Board of Elections, okay? The site requires you to put in your address and it will tell you where to go, okay? It'll tell you your polling location on November 3rd and your early voting location and the hours usually that they are open. Okay, next slide, please. The number one way that citizens can get out the vote is to talk it up. Educate themselves and be sure to mention voting to everyone, your caregivers, neighbors, checkout clerks, medical assistants, and health professionals. I asked my doctor, and you know what he said? Oh, I forgot. He's a busy guy, I'm sure it's hard. And I said, good, now you've remembered. So, you know, if everyone that you speak to, if they can recruit 2 more people and you recruit, I mean, you know, it's an exponential expansion of our voter turnout if everybody makes that effort. Okay, next slide, please. So the other way that you can get out the vote is to, you know, reach out to people who are further than your daily, you know, daily walks and things. And I think it's especially true, excuse me, it's especially true for people who have disabilities, is to stay safe during the pandemic, you can make phone calls, you can send emails to people you know, to your family, you can go through social media if you have a social media account, and you can also go old school. Send people cards and letters and say, hey, I was just wondering, do you have a plan for voting in November, right? So just, keep reaching out to people. I think it's important. If you know of people with grandchildren, make sure that they have reached out to them, especially as they come up on voting age. Okay, I think last slide. So pretty much everything related to polling is determined at the county level, other than ADA compliance. That is federally mandated. The number of polling locations, number of machines at each location, the type of machines that are used, the number of poll workers, all of this is governed by your county board of elections. So we really don't know what New York is going to look like even next month, let alone, in November. What we do know, I can tell you this, is if you have a plan, you are much more likely to get to vote. My recommendation is to apply for your absentee ballot now and then hold off sending it. If you would prefer to vote in person, just hold on to your ballot. It won't come for a little while. So you need to do the two-step process. And the first step is to send in that application. And you can do that now. I recommend that everybody do that now. The way that the voting law is in New York, even if you send in your absentee ballot, if you feel safe voting, either during early voting days or on November 3rd, your in-person vote will always take precedence over a mailed-in or dropped-off ballot, okay? Once you have your absentee ballot, you can decide whether or not it's safe enough for you to go in person. As far as transportation goes, that was there was a mention about that. The league does not offer rides to the polls, and that's partly due to insurance issues. Other leagues might. I cannot speak for all leagues. I can only speak for the Albany County. We do not offer rides, and a piece of that is insurance, but also it's just a really time-intensive and complicated thing to put together all of the people who need rides with people who can offer rides. The CDTA usually has a hotline, and it's like a little star bus, and you call in and they have a pickup location. It may not be at your doorstep, but they do offer free busing to the polls. And I will mention that Uber and Lyft also, you need to have the app on your phone, but they do both offer free rides to the polls on election day, not early voting, I don't think. That is pretty much what I have. I will remind everybody to make sure and stay alive, because you can't vote if you're not alive.
Only in Albany County can you do that. That's an old joke. Right? In fact, when I was a reporter, we sent out postcards to people we know who were deceased, and we found them still registered and apparently had voted in some elections. So we had a good time with that in the late 70s. As you know, Andy, that was rather pervasive in Albany County back during the Corning regime, but that's neither here nor there. Andy, thank you so much. We'll open it up for questions, and you all have been unmuted out there in the field. So please feel free to speak and tell us your questions, or write them in your chat box or the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So fire away, please, to Andy and her colleague Lynn in the field. We do have a couple things already in the chat box. This is from Monica. Monica Bartley says, we can apply online for absentee ballots in New York City. So I believe that's the case down there. And Phil, friend from Onondaga County, says Syracuse, those folks in Onondaga County, the Syracuse area, can also apply online for absentee ballots. I just want to double check that. Can we confirm that New York City and Onondaga County will do online absentee ballot applications? So far, so good? Good, okay. Our friend Gregg Beratan, who's also one of our panelists today, he's asking, Andy, if someone has their guardianship removed and redeclared competent, are they still deemed ineligible to vote?
No, if a judge has said that they are competent, then they are competent.
Okay, so that's the
Yep.
final word, is the judge's word.
Yep.
Also from Phil, he has a question here. Has anyone had any experience with ballot marking devices at early voting sites? Ballot marking devices at early voting sites. Some voting day polling sites have incompetent poll workers, making it hard to use assistive equipment. And having been one of those poll workers, I know exactly what you're talking about, Phil. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, so they are, the Board of Elections does do training for poll workers, and they are supposed to be trained in how to use the ballot marking devices that the county has chosen to use. If they don't, then my recommendation would be to go with an affidavit ballot,
Yes.
right? Which just makes it is a paper ballot and makes it a little bit less challenging, but it's also, there's a small risk involved that they don't get counted. It's a very small risk. I think, 1 in 10,000 gets misplaced, basically, lost.
Right. Here's a very, very important question about the semantics at the polls. Here's the question probably for Andy or anybody else who wants to pick this up and elaborate. Could a panelist please define poll worker, poll watcher, and election inspector so everyone is on the same page? Poll worker, poll watcher, and election inspector. Andy?
Anybody else want to take that one?
Anybody?
I can try. I believe that poll inspectors are sort of the upper, the sort of management level at each location. So there's usually only one at each location, one poll inspector. Poll
Andy,
worker. Oh, go ahead.
And Andy, I was an election. We're called election inspectors, and each party, each major party, Democrats and Republicans, generally in New York State, have at least one poll inspector, election inspector per party per voting area to polling place.
Locations, right, by location.
And so the election inspectors are trained by the County Board of Election on all things election related, from ballot marking devices to what happens if you have a disturbance, a physical disturbance in the election place. What about campaigning on site? There are probably 1,000 different things we went through in training, and the training's ongoing, and it usually happens a couple weeks before the primary and the general election. But that, and also we're paid. Those poll inspectors, those voting inspectors, election inspectors are paid by the County Board of Elections to do the job from the time the polls open to the time they close, to delivering the ballots and back to the Board of Elections. So that's the election inspector. Now, how about the poll workers and the poll watchers?
I believe the poll watcher has to have a form. They have to come in, if I remember correctly, there's a specific form they have to have. They usually represent some sort of a party, either Democratic Party or Republican Party, and they have to present it to the election inspector, and then they're allowed, or give it actually to the election inspector, and then they're allowed to ask questions about what is going on and so forth. But you have to actually present this special form to the election inspector before they can answer your questions. But they can hang around and observe. That's what I was told.
Yes.
Right.
Any other day it would be called loitering, but on election day, it's fine. Right.
And then your poll workers are the ones that you approach the table, and they have, now they're using tablets, like an iPad, and, they will make sure that you are on the voting roll, and if you're not on the voting roll, that's the person that would get you an affidavit ballot, and they cover the basics, and I think they are the bread and butter of every polling location.
That's right. That's right. Any other discussion about the three types of folks you're going to meet at the polls? Okay, we have a question from Julie Farrar. Can we still hand deliver or drop off 10 ballots? Can we start setting up volunteers with accessible vehicles to assist people with getting to the polls? Also, I use the BMD ballot marking device in primary and it was a challenge, but at least every poll worker knew how to fix it by the time we were done, and the county election workers knew how to fix the printer. Wonderful. Okay, but how about can we still hand deliver or drop off 10 ballots? And can we start setting up volunteers with accessible vehicles to get to the polls? Let's talk about that for a couple of seconds.
Are they talking about absentee ballots?
Julie, can you clarify that if you're online?
Yeah, so I'm from Colorado and we're all mail-in, and I've also really worked on get out the vote stuff, activities in that state, and we were allowed to, like, you could deliver 10 ballots for, I mean, they had to be sealed and everything, but you could deliver just 10. There was a limit on how many you could deliver for people, and I don't know if that's possible, but if people are homebound, or that's bad language, but people are stuck at home, or to be honest, they're too afraid to leave their home, which a lot of disabled people are right now. In Colorado, you could deliver like ballots for neighbors, or, you have a party and you all fill out the ballot together, whatever, and then you would help people who couldn't physically get there, drop them off. Because I'm nervous, and I think just because they say that they're stopping, all this post office nonsense, we're still safest dropping off the ballots, because just because we can't see what they're doing, they shut down all the processing centers. So I feel like just like I think it was Andy said, like, we need to jump on this strategically right now to get out the vote. And, I just want to know how I can be most helpful to the, like, driving or whatever it is, or dropping off ballots to maximize the fact that I have an accessible van and I'm willing to do that.
Yeah, so I can't really speak to Colorado because I don't know a whole lot about it, but as far as the absentee ballots in New York go, there is no limit. So I have, for example, a friend who, she works in, I think it's, like Daughters of Sarah or one of these care homes. And she has about 115 residents that she works with, and they're all going to vote by absentee ballot, and she will deliver all of them directly to the Board of Elections herself. So there's no restriction in New York on how many ballots can be delivered at the same time by one person. As long as they're all in their double envelope, put your magic gloves on and get the one envelope into the other envelope. I tried it last June in the primaries, and it was challenging. I tore the envelope, so,
Yeah, and that is, well, I think that's another issue, is there are people that we know who are gonna have challenges. And so how can we help make it as accessible as possible for people? People who have visual impairments, who are immunosuppressed, people who have low, hand dexterity. That it is discrimination, it just is. And so if I assist somebody with putting that first envelope in that second envelope, and they seal it and sign it or whatever they have to do, is that
totally legal? That's fine.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep, because there's, for sure, quadriplegic that have no hand dexterity at all, and they are assisted, from start to finish. And it's not done through a legality, it's just allowed. So, yep.
Also at the polling site, if someone has difficulty marking the ballot, but doesn't need a ballot marking device or needs help, perhaps reading it or what have you, make sure that an election inspector from both parties is present when advice or help is given. Make sure that obviously the Democrats and Republicans are represented, that nobody is given any untoward advice or counsel to a voter about their selection. So occasionally when I was an inspector, we would be called in, we had the old machines, into the machine itself with a curtain, and there would be a Democrat, I was the Republican, and we would be there with a voter and his or her assistant or aide, and we would make sure that everything was done according to the book. And so everybody had eyes and ears on the process, and nobody was saying so-and-so did such and such. If both parties are present, then we have a good deal.
Yeah.
One thing to
Sounds cozy.
Yeah, it was very cozy in those voting booths, yes, but
Sorry,
it happened
Greg.
occasionally, yes. Also, we have a question from Michael Ring. He's asking, are Uber and Lyft offering free rides this year to the election sites?
Yeah, yeah, I did mention that. You have to have the app on your phone to be able to access them, which doesn't work for everybody, but it's not super hard. If you can download Candy Crush, you can download Uber. Yes, they do offer round trip, but it's usually on two different rides.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
they won't stand and wait for you, so it might take a little extra time.
That's good to know. Any other questions from the field at this point, folks? Please either put them into the chat box at the bottom of your screen or the Q&A box, or chime in. All of you have been unmuted out there in the field.
Ron, one update. While we were speaking, my friend Catherine Carroll was kind enough to share a tweet from Zach Fink, who is reporting that the governor will sign the absentee ballot legislation today.
Today.
Yes. So
That's
Break
very
out the
exciting.
champagne,
Thanks,
ladies and
Greg.
gentlemen.
good news.
That's
That's
very
great
good
news.
news. Congratulations, everybody. That took a lot of pushing and pulling to get that done. So congratulations to everybody who had a hand in that. Terrific. That's terrific news. Thanks, Greg. You're on top
Ron,
of
I
the
think
game.
there's one other question here that might be worth answering to the general public. It says, do you have suggestions for people to print digital ballots and applications who do not have access to technology or a printer? And there have been, like, libraries have been a really, really big resource for that. You can usually just walk up to the information desk, tell them that you need a registration form or an absentee ballot form. If they don't have them, they will print them for you, often for free, or it costs 10 cents, something like that. I don't know if libraries are able to do that yet, especially in New York. Most of the libraries have very limited services so far. But if you call them, there are people at the libraries now. So if you call them, they may in fact be able to do that for you. The other way to do it, if you have mobility, is to actually just go to the Board of Elections, and they have all the forms that you would need. You can fill them out right there and turn them in and walk away. So that's sort of a quick and dirty way to do it. If you do not have any access to that stuff, I believe you can still call the Board of Elections and they will send you any forms that you need. So you call your county Board of Elections and you ask them to send you an absentee ballot request form or a voter registration form.
Good. Any other questions before we move on? Good.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks so much, Andy. And we're going to continue our discussion with a roundtable discussion with SSAN representatives from around the state, after which we'll unmute you all again, or you can type in your questions. Joining us today are Maria Samuels. She's the Executive Director of Westchester Disabled on the Move. Phil Prehn, he's with the Statewide Systems Advocate at Arise in Syracuse. We have Gregg, Director of Advocacy and Development from Center for Disability Rights in Rochester, and he's co-founder of #CryptTheVote. And we also have Monica Bartley from the Center for Independence of the Disabled in New York. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to start with Maria because during our last webinar, Carrie Gray from the American Association of People with Disabilities spoke to us quite a bit about REV UP, and that's a network composed of state and national coalitions that work to advance the disability vote. Now, as Executive Director of Westchester Disabled on the Move in Yonkers, Maria has worked extensively with other organizations to create REV UP Westchester. Now, Maria, can you share some of your experience with us, please?
Okay, thank you. Yes, the REV UP Westchester started in 2018 in a very small way. We had a lot of obstacles. We faced multiple obstacles back then. It was, the reception was, might I say, lukewarm to it. It was not easy for us to get the word out, but we were sort of a ragtag team. We had Westchester Independent Living Center on board, which is the other ILC other than Westchester Disabled on the Move. We also had Westchester Council of the Blind of New York working with us. So it started out small, and but it was an experience that we built on in 2019, where it sort of took up a really good momentum. And with the assistance, the leadership of our systems advocate, we were able to move forward and really expand, including having a Facebook. We launched a Facebook, which really helped to bring in the younger people into into the group. We had several events that were successful, including at Rye Playland of all places, you know, which was fun also, you know, but it brought the attention to the cause, and even the county executive showed up and congratulated us on it. So it was very good. We managed to register a lot of people. We had a college event. We had other community-based organizations who opened up their doors to us. So that was a good thing. So we felt pretty good about that. We were looking forward to 2020. So we even had a very big breakfast in February to launch 2020. And that was very successful. It came out in the news. Our local news is very, very friendly towards the people with disability community. And that helps a lot, you know, to get the word out about our organization and what we do and the causes that people with disabilities have and the needs, et cetera. So that event was our biggest success to date. Then things changed in March. Needless to say, we had to shut our doors. It took us approximately 6 weeks before we came back up and running. During that time, we weren't doing anything regarding REV UP Westchester. The groups that we had together, which included Berkeley College, they also had to gear up and sort of prepare for the new world, as we're calling it. So the REV UP Westchester sort of stalled during that time, but the interest is still there. There are a lot of local issues too that kinds of spurs on REV UP Westchester, including the local issues regarding the selection of the ballot marking device. Very much upper front of one of the things that we have in. It's a sort of a bone of contention regarding which machine is going to be selected and how it's going to be purchased. So that became sort of on the periphery of the REV UP Westchester, but it did bring attention to the REV UP Westchester and getting people out to vote. There were also other things that came up that actually helped us in the beginning, and that was actually the support of the local legislators. And I think one of the reasons that the legislators and elected officials kind of started to get interested is this July 2019 article that came out in Times Magazine that showed that in 2018, there was an 8.5% surge of voters with disability. That would catch any elected official's attention right then and there, because it showed the power that is there. And we're finally starting to use it, which is like so amazing to me. And I think that it really inspired me also to keep going. So that was a really good thing. And we have been pushing for people to go out to vote. That was like our thing, go out and vote. And don't just use the pen and the absentee ballot. Do be visible at the polls. That was our message. Because before, we were encouraged, and when I say we, I'm talking about the people with disabilities, were encouraged to make your life easier. Why aren't you just using the absentee ballot? You don't have to trudge out and worry about inaccessible sites, etc., when you have the absentee ballot. And I've heard that said many times. That was sort of the reason, you know, given why the poll sites, you know, may not be accessible, but you have the absentee ballot. That really gets me ticked off, you know. So REV UP Westchester was actually saying, go and be visible at the polls. Demand to use the ballot marking device, demand it. And as I think someone mentioned earlier, the ballot marking device can be an issue at the polling site. And it has been an issue in this county repeatedly. The election inspectors are trained, like I think beginning in March or something of the election year. And by the time the election comes around in November, understandably, they don't remember this ballot marking device and how it works, because it works differently from the other devices and other machines. So therefore, you have people who were trained months ago. So when somebody with a vision issue or is blind comes in, or who needs the machine comes in to use it, they're like, duh, you know, or one time it wasn't even plugged in. You know, we had, as someone told us, the machine was, they didn't expect anyone to really, I think, and this is my feeling, anyone to really need the machine, because so few people actually come in and actually use it. It's usually shunted off to the side. You know, it's not even where you know, where it would be. And of course, if you're blind, you know, many times, and I had one person who's a member of Westchester Council of the Blind say for years he voted, he didn't even know this machine existed. No one told him about it. It was like a secret machine in his polling place, and he voted every year, and not one election inspector mentioned to him, by the way, do you know you can vote privately and independently on the ballot marking device that's sitting over there? No, no one mentioned it to him. So that was part of the REV UP Westchester, was to bring to the attention of people with disabilities, this machine exists and it's a powerful way to vote. So, so of course things changed with the COVID-19. We've had to sort of try to figure out what our platform is going to be. And I'm happy to say today that I have a new REV UP Westchester coordinator, thank goodness. So we're gonna be back on track. She's a social media expert and she's ready to go. She accepted the position today. So we're going to have, what is it, 68 days or something to really get this back up, rev it up again and get it back on track. Thank goodness we have at least 2 organizations, 2 major ones that are already on board. So that's a good thing. So our Facebook and other social media is going to be back on. And it's not easy to try to sell this idea during this pandemic to vote. There is, like any other people without disabilities, we're faced with a media and people who are telling us that our vote doesn't count, or something awful is going to happen to our vote, it's going to be switched, or it's never going to make it, or something. And coming from different people, and I don't want to get political, but you know, but it's coming from different people telling us that our vote in general, not just people with disabilities, might not count because of something going on in the post office. You know, so to try to get people more energized and more into it, back into it again, is not going to be easy, you know, but it's definitely doable, and it has to be done because this is such an important election year. I almost feel like it's a do or die situation. We've got to get it done. We've got to get people out, absentee ballot out, or physically out if they can, to vote. And this is going to set actually sort of the bar for future elections, because if we can show that people with disabilities have such a strong voice, and I'm talking like we're roaring here, you know, and yeah, they need to pay attention to our needs in Albany, in Washington, because we are important as a bloc, not just the Blacks and not just the Latinos, because they do pay attention to that, but also people with disabilities. Pay attention. And do you have any questions?
Wonderful. How about Phil, Greg, and Monica dovetailing some comments with what we just heard?
Sorry, this is Greg. Just to add to that, I mean, let's also recognize that as a bloc, we are all of those other groups. The disability community is so diverse and includes everyone from every other community. I mean, you know, we are a part of every other community, is what I'm trying to say, and I think we lose that, and I think that's an important factor that shows how powerful bloc we can be.
Yeah.
Phil, please add something.
I remember reading a report that came out after the 2016 election that showed that we did an amazing job of increasing the registrations of people with disabilities, but didn't get all of that increase to the polls. So getting out the vote is, we can't stop at getting people registered. We got to, get the souls to the polls.
Right. Monica, how about something from
Yes.
you, please?
I would like to endorse what Maria said about the ballot marking device. The poll workers require additional training when it comes on to the ballot marking devices, because all poll workers should be made aware that other people, anyone can use the ballot marking device, and they should not discourage people from using it. So I think it all boils down to poll worker training, where they need to be taught hands-on how to operate the machine and the purpose of the machine, so that they can make voters aware, anyone. There are people who can't read the fine print on the ballot, and they would benefit greatly from using the ballot marking device.
Very good. We have a comment from Christopher Cubis in the field there, and he's saying, many New York State citizens who are on parole are allowed to vote and may not be aware of it. He says in 2018, Governor Cuomo signed an executive order restoring the right to vote to individuals on parole. This order restores the right to vote upon release from incarceration. The governor's office reviews the information of each person released to the community supervision in New York and issues a partial executive pardon that restores each approved person's ability to register and vote. So can anybody elaborate on the governor's executive order back in 18?
Ron, I think I can speak to it. They do have to apply for that additional level of acceptance. The governor's office is where they have to apply to, and then the governor's office will give them leave to be able to vote while on parole. So it did not change the law in New York State. What it did was allow for anyone who is currently on parole for a felony offense. So there are other, other reasons that people are on parole, but if they are on parole for a felony offense, they can apply to the governor's office, and that would allow them to vote.
Good. Okay. Good.
But a lot of people who are done, they've finished their parole, they finished their sentence, they still don't think they can vote. Lynn Nugent can speak to that.
Okay.
Go, Lynn.
Lynn.
Yes, I can. It was shocking to be doing get out the vote tabling in a local mall, and people saying that they were ex-felons and they didn't think they could vote. Someone who's been in the grips of the law, you'd think they'd understand their rights a little better. But anyway, that's the world.
We were chasing them. We were, with our pamphlets, we're running after them in the mall, and they're pushing their baby carriages, and we're running after them saying, no, you can vote. You can vote. You're all done. You can vote. You can vote.
You just have to register.
It was very entertaining, I'm sure.
Now, Chris Cubis, who posed that information about the parolees, Chris writes also, upon release, your parole officer gives you a form to apply, and you just fill it out and they review it. It's very easy.
It should be.
It should be, yes.
It should be, yep. But I don't know that every parole officer is doing due diligence on that.
Good question, yes. So
my neighbor across the street, her son is on parole for a felony offense, and was never given that information. Really, I think it does depend a little bit.
Good. So ask the question and press for the answer. Maria, just one follow-up question, if I may, please. Obviously, you mentioned Facebook, and of course, in the era of social media, everything revolves around this, that, and the other. What reaction did you get when you saw your Facebook followers take off and really embrace your message?
I was shocked. I'm not a Facebook person, so yes.
Never mind.
I was pleasantly shocked, yeah. And it was very good feeling. A lot of the people who responded did show up for some future events. One of the people, the one who actually did the majority of the work on the Facebook, kind of wanted to know how it affected what we were doing.
Yeah.
And so she asked that, she was told the table people at the next event to ask, did you see our Facebook site? What did you like about, that kind of question. So yeah. And the good thing about the person that's going to be starting Monday, she's a social media person. She's I think she's not even 24, but so she's really into Instagram, Snapchat, and things I never heard of.
That's terrific. Good. Well, that's the kind of people you need on board now to reach a different audience as well.
Exactly.
Very good. Thanks, Maria, so much. Now I'd like to ask Dr. Gregg Beratan. He's Director of Advocacy and Development for the Center for Disability Rights in Rochester. And I want to ask him about the Twitter hashtag he co-created. It's called #CryptTheVote. Now that hashtag is widely used by disability advocates to share election-related information. It's fascinating for all of us. And Gregg, please tell us more about it and your success.
Sure. Back in 2016, there were a bunch of folk online, particularly on Twitter, paying close attention to the election. And I think we were about 12, maybe 13 debates in. Remember there were about 26 candidates and one on the Republican side and 3 candidates on the Democratic side, all vying for the election. And they had a huge number of debates. And we're listening, and I think about 12 or 13 debates in, a few of us started noting there had been no mention of the disability community, that we had been left out of all of these debates. So I approached 2 colleagues, Alice Wong, who, if you don't know, please look her up, because Alice is the queen of disability media, and has created venues for disabled people to share their voice and their stories on the web, in a podcast, now a wonderful new book. And Andrew Pulrang, who has a wonderful blog called Disability Thinking, currently writes for Forbes magazine. And we'd all been noting this silence on disability and disabled people's issues and issues that mattered to our community. So we started out, we thought we'd have a chat or a live tweet of one of these debates to try and spark some discussion, maybe get the attention of some moderators or some of the candidates. And so we have, we announced and posted some things and started live tweeting. And within a couple of weeks, the disability community took over the hashtag. I mean, we like to say we organize it, and we have organized, I think, well over 60 chats at this point on a variety of issues. And I certainly recommend looking at our blog to see the recaps of all those chats. But really the success that Ron mentioned is about the disability community taking ownership of the hashtag. And within a couple of weeks, people were tweeting on the hashtag 24 hours a day. They were approaching politicians, asking their positions on issues. They were sharing news stories. They were sparking discussions on their own. And it was an amazing thing to see. I think, the discussions progressed over time and got more intense, and we had some of the most incredible discussions about issues that I've ever seen anywhere, let alone on a seemingly short-bodied media like Twitter. And it highlighted the expertise of some of our community and really started to get the attention of politicians. So you started in 2018 to see politicians posting on the hashtag and seeing them ask the community, what do you think of this? What are the issues that are important to you? Really starting to engage our community. And that came to an even higher, a higher level this year, or in this past year, as we held our first 2 chats with actual presidential candidates. So we, in, I believe, January or February, we held 2 chats, one with Elizabeth Warren, another with Pete Buttigieg. We're still hoping to get President Trump and Vice President Biden to do chats, and if anyone has any pull with those campaigns, please send them our way. We are nonpartisan. We are open to anything. We're mainly focused on bringing disability issues into the political sphere and the political mainstream. And to that extent, I think we've had an amazing run of it so far. We've seen candidates release in-depth proposals this year that were beyond anything we've ever seen from presidential candidates. And I would say this, it's not only about the presidential politics, because we've had chats and we've talked to people about local issues, state issues. And so, you know, one of the things that has become clear throughout is that every issue is a disability issue. And that is why these efforts like GOTV, you know, the Get Out the Vote efforts, Rev Up, all of these efforts to get people to the polls and voting are so important, because every issue that you can think of affects the disability community, whether it's gun control or the carceral system or the legal system or something as simple as snow removal. These are all issues that affect our community, and so the more we can do to get people out to vote, the better. And one of the things that Maria mentioned that I think is so important, visibility, the act of actually voting. I think we had a chat on the accessibility of the polls at one point, and one of the things people said is I like having the option of absentee ballots, but there are times when I feel it's important to be seen, and I think that is such a big thing, because the more people see us voting, the less that ballot marking device seems like a special dispensation to us, and more like our right to be there and casting our vote. And so I think there's something very important about going out to the polls and being there. That said, you know, particularly in this environment, I want the option of doing an absentee ballot as well. So I'm really glad that the governor is signing legislation today. But getting out the vote, however people choose to go and vote or send their vote in, is so important. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I said I'd talk about. I mean, I think one of the things I think, and Maria mentioned their new coordinator has social media experience. I can't underestimate the power of social media to get people out, to get to people, to explain these issues to people. I mean, I don't think the response we've seen, the engagement we've seen from candidates would have taken place if we hadn't had such strong engagement from the disability community in the first place. And so, you know, that's why Alessandra and I are always quick to credit the rest of the community in making this work.
Yeah, politicians have a tendency to pay attention to you when you have numbers behind you. And certainly the social media component is so much more important today than it was even 10 years ago when it was just starting. So any other panelists want to weigh in on this, on the social media angles of this Get Out the Vote project?
We have
One thing, Oh, go ahead,
Monica
please.
speaking. Yeah, we've used social media to target our consumers by posting messages using Twitter and Facebook, by using messages to encourage them to vote. Message like your vote, your voice. But we really haven't targeted candidates in the way Gregg has. And I'm going to look into that going forward.
Good. Good.
And the great thing, I mean, the great thing about something like the hashtag, if it's used for what people want it. I mean, we haven't dictated to people what they use it for. Some people reach out to candidates. Some people just reach out to the community. And so you can use it to push your GOTV efforts if you like. It's a place where the disability community gathers to discuss issues related to politics, whether or not it's for some people partisan, for other people's nonpartisan. You know, the three of us view our activities as nonpartisan, and we keep it that way. So, I mean, I think any get out the vote effort would be welcome on the hashtag.
Great. Thank you all. Now I'm going to ask Phil Prehn. He's the statewide systems advocate for ARISE, Center for Independent Living in Syracuse. And he's going to tell us about its disability forum for elected officials. Phil, the forum is yours.
Well, thank you. For 20 years now, we've hosted what we call the Candidate Forum on Disability Issues. The sort of philosophy behind having this event is this is our get out the vote drive, because you know, we want people with disabilities to understand how an election affects them. And that's what's going to drive people to the polls, when they have a real solid understanding of what this is going to mean for their lives. So we have it every year. So we do local, county, you know, city, county, state races. We don't do the large ones like the governor or the presidential, but love to get them if we could. We've expanded it out, so we've created a coalition of disability rights organizations here in Onondaga County who work on this program every year. We usually start right around now in August to plan the late October, early November events. Generally late October. Although we've pushed it right to election eve one year. The real key to that is that we have a series of leadership meetings to discuss and draft the questions that we're going to ask of the participants in the forum. So we try to you know, get input from a wide variety of sources, and you know, make sure that you know, we get some solid questions. Everything that we discuss is in some way related to disability issues, whether or not it's an issue that maybe other groups might be talking about, but how it affects disability people, or real specific policies that are directly affecting people with disabilities. All the roles that we have in the event are done by people with disabilities. This isn't a thing where our agency heads come in and we have or professional people come in to do the moderation. One of the other things we found on getting out the vote is that when you get people to run these events themselves, they take pride in it, and they take ownership of it. I think it's similar to the hashtag. You know, they adopt this as their own. So, you know, all the roles, presenters, greeters, you know, moderators, timekeepers, everybody is, you know, part of our grassroots effort, our grassroots group, you know, that works on policy. and over 20 years, we've become established and we're recognized by candidates. So when we come calling, they know, you know, what we're about and why we're calling and why they need to attend. So we get awfully good participation. You know, county legislature, last year we had one with city and county races, and the county legislator had 17 open seats, and we had like a panel of something like 26 people. So, you know, which was fun to run. But so anyway, and it's a nonpartisan, no direct debate forum. I mean, we've played around with the forums. We've had town halls. We've had a forum where we present the question and each person answers it, you know, one by one. But we don't have any direct feedback between the candidates. Someone mentioned earlier that, you know, we didn't want to get people, you know, people get upset by some of the, you know, harsh back and forth sometimes. And so it's more informational. We always post it as that. And then, you know, we're having a lot of, we always make sure that there's time during the event that people who just happen to wander in have the ability, if they really want to ask a question. So we'll have people in the audience with microphones. This is back in the day when we when we had actual audiences. You know, we make sure that people are able to pose their question, because I don't think there's anything more frustrating than coming to an event and not being able to get your question asked. We have one of the main roles that we have is that we make sure that we have a couple people taking scrupulous notes about what the people say. And then we draft a final sort of overview of the event that we send out to our whole mailing list prior to the election. And we use that in our advocacy department because we make sure we have an extremely scrupulous notation of everything that the winner of the election said, because we're going to hold them accountable for that. So, yeah, again, this is the way that we look at get out the vote, is make sure that people feel that they have a personal stake in this election, give them an ability to create an event that they can control and own. And then, you know, and the last thing, we make sure that we tell everyone we have registrations at the event. And if anyone's not registered, we can get them that. So
that's terrific. Gregg, have you done something similar in Rochester?
Sorry, yeah. I mean, I was going to ask Phil about that because we're looking at it right now. We've done several legislative forums. We've also done a legislative breakfast. The thing we're looking at now is doing something like this. The logistics of it are what's tricky, and I was wondering if Phil had actually thought if they were planning on doing something this year online.
Yep. We've had one planning meeting, and we all agreed that we're going to have to do something, you know, like this, a Zoom sort of event. But we're groping in the dark. We'll figure it out, though. But we're definitely going to have something in late October. We have a very big congressional race here, and we're going to focus on that. So
good. That's great. Any other comments from our panelists on this? Please, Maria.
I think I'm unmuted. Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question. And this is a dilemma we faced before. Our organization serves people with disabilities. And one of the problems that we also face, not just for REV UP Westchester, but in general, is communicating or getting in touch with people who don't have access to even a particularly good smartphone. You know, they're more dependent on their circle of support, getting them the information, and also snail mail. You know, I see that as a problem nowadays, how that's going to work, especially since the circle of support is kind of broken for a lot of our consumers. It's getting back together little by little, but what's broken sometimes can't be mended because of other issues that happened. We're depending now on Zoom, Zoom this, Zoom that, Zoom the other. It's hard to Zoom for some people on their phones. It's just not going to happen. I'm wondering if we have other ways, creative ways that I haven't thought of or I can't conceive that has been tried or we're thinking of doing for this election going forward, to once we've done all this work and putting our base together to keep it going. You know, if this new technologically driven world, how are we going to handle for the people who are I'm going to call them the outliers?
Yeah.
I don't have an answer.
Does anybody?
I mean, I think one of the things we've tried to do in this, since the start of the pandemic, I think we've made about 16,000 wellness calls. All the staff here chipped in and called all of the consumers of the center and just to make sure everyone was okay. But it was also useful in conveying some information. So, for example, we shared with people that full trust was still running and there were no interruptions to their service. There are all sorts of ways you can do that. You can also, I mean, many centers have newsletters that go out via snail mail. You can, focus the articles that you put in the newsletter on something that is important to everyone in terms of getting out the vote. I don't think there's any one solution that's going to get to everybody, but I think, if we come up with a variety and try and push them all out, I think that you'll be able to maximize the reach.
It sounds like there's enough material there for another workshop. That might be something you want to do in the future. Right now I want to call on Monica Bartley. She is the Community Outreach Coordinator for Center for Independence of Disabled in New York. She's based in Manhattan. And each year, her organization organizes a large group to survey poll sites on Election Day, and they are assessing physical accessibility and whether the accessible ballot marking devices are properly set up. Please take it away, Monica.
Thank you, and thank you, Ron. Okay, Sydney has been surveying poll sites for ADA compliance since 2001. We encourage voters with disabilities to use their neighborhood polling sites and voting machines to vote independently and privately. We want them to be visible at the polls. So you can imagine it's a completely different scenario now, pushing absentee voting, when previously the message was visibility at the polls. We conduct surveys for primary and general elections in all 5 boroughs. Surveyors consist of staff and volunteers who must attend a 3-hour training session. They are organized in teams of 2 on election day, each assigned 5 polling sites. On average, we usually do about 50 sites. We continue to see barriers that make it difficult, if not impossible, for people with disabilities to access their poll sites or to vote independently and privately sometimes. Since 2003, Sydney has surveyed 1,335 polling sites with an average of 71.4% with barriers. Because of COVID-19, our last poll site survey was done in November 2019. We operate a voter hotline on election day, so voters can call in with any issues they have. And then we would contact the Board of Elections and report the issue. And if it can be resolved within the day, yes. This includes broken ballot marking devices. Sometimes people have to wait for a long time for the technician to turn up at the site. Sometimes it's a simple problem. As Maria said, the machine might not be plugged in. So, and the problem is that the poll worker doesn't know how to operate the machine. Sometimes it's a voter who has to show the poll worker how to use the machine. In addition to that, we conduct an individual voter survey so we can get the experiences of voters on election day. For the last election, where we mostly did absentee voting, we did a post-vote survey focusing on how people got their ballots, whether they applied for absentee ballots, whether they voted in person at their polling site, generally what their experience was. Some people did not even get their ballot on time and were forced to go to their polling site to vote. We conduct certain like voter outreach where we partner with organizations and do voter registration drives. And we also do voter education where we visit different groups of people with disabilities, telling them about their voting rights and how to use the ballot marking device and so on. We organize training at the Board of Elections, County Board of Elections site, where people can go in and practice on the ballot marking device. If we're having a sufficiently large event, the Board of Elections will take the ballot marking device on site so people can get a chance to practice on it. So those are some of the things that we do in our voting rights program.
Monica, that's very interesting. We have a question from Zachary for you, Monica. The question from Zach is, will you be taking your poll site evaluator training online for the upcoming participation?
For this season, because of COVID-19, we are not sure we're going to do poll site surveys. We're still evaluating the situation, and we are thinking of doing maybe a few early voting sites. If we confirm that, which we'll know by October. So if we're going to do that, then we'll do our training online.
Good. Here's a question for all the panelists also, and this is from Zachary as well. Have any of you tried any new strategies to inform people who are not aware of the importance of disability rights and universal design? New strategies to inform people about that you can share.
I don't know. I mean, Twitter has been a great way to connect with other communities. And so we've seen lots of people come into our chats that aren't necessarily from the disability community. Most have been extremely respectful of the letting disabled voices take the lead in our discussions, but we've had some really incredible conversations across communities. We did a chat with Rock the Vote, the MTV project, and that brought a whole bunch of people into the community and started a few discussions that took lives of their own. So I mean, I don't know. I think any way you can reach out and connect with another person or someone that might not necessarily have connected through your traditional venues, I think that's fantastic. And I mean, we did something like this about a month ago for AAPD, Rev Up, they had their Power Summit, and someone suggested using TikTok videos. Well, I know nothing about TikTok, but except that it's, you know, these brief like 12-second videos or something.
Right.
But if you can use a 12-second video to get across the need to vote, to get out the vote,
Right.
I think that's fantastic.
Use it. If it's there, use it. And you never know who's going to respond to it or how they're going to respond to it, as you all found with the Twitter feeds. Absolutely. Let's take a few questions from the field now. We're going to unmute everybody and either tell us your question or send it through the chat box or the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So let's open it up for questions before we call it a day. Anybody out there? I'm not seeing anything new. Anybody on the chat box or the Q&A box, or anybody want to chime in here?
I have a question for Monica. I mean, I'm curious, since you've done this now for so long, as the project to look at the polling sites has continued, have you seen more responsiveness from either the city or from polling officials to ensure accessibility?
Yes, a number of changes have taken place since we have been doing our surveys. And the main reason for this was because of our lawsuit that we had in 2010. And the remedy that the judge ordered has brought about significant changes, because each polling site has to choose a disability coordinator on election day. That person will check the polling sites throughout the day at regular intervals to make sure all the accessibility features are in place. For example, that pathways are clear, ballot marking devices working, signs, directional signs are still in place. We have seen improved signage, and we have seen where, well, both parties, the Board of Elections along with the parties, the plaintiffs, that included United Panel, DIA, Sydney surveys were used in the case as expert witness. We developed a checklist on both sides that we agreed on, and that checklist is what is used to check the polling sites throughout the day. So we have seen significant changes. We have seen ramps that are more compliant with ADA standards, but we still see a number of the same barriers, because as I mentioned before, the last survey we did, we had approximately 74% barriers. And some of these barriers are attributed to architectural barriers, where the building, like doorways, are too narrow or the door lip is too high. So some of the barriers can be remedied within the course of the day. Some are architectural and have to be addressed. I think because we use a lot of schools, I think it calls for a working relationship between the Board of Elections and the Department of Education to make sure that the school buildings are accessible. And if that's done, then we would be able to eliminate some of the barriers we see. But we have indeed come a long way.
Wonderful. There's more to do, obviously. And I want to thank all of our participants on the roundtable. Maria, Phil, Greg, and Monica, your comments were right on target. And I want to thank all of you for attending today and for all of your engagement, your great questions. And most of all, thank you all for what you do in our communities all across New York State, day after day, year after year. Very much appreciated. Now, as a reminder, please complete the evaluation form that will be emailed to you. We value your input and encourage your ideas for future programs. I think we had a couple of topics here that could generate into larger workshops. And we hope you enjoyed this series as much as we enjoyed putting it together for you. And we hope you find the information useful in pulling together the Get Out the Vote campaigns in your own centers. And the resources from these webinars will be posted at ilny.us. Again, ilny.us. Be safe, be well, and thank you again for attending.
Thank you
Thanks, Ron, and thanks, Niall.
very much.
Have a great day, everybody.
Yeah.
Good day.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.